Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's ChemCareers webinar. Today we're talking all about how to transition out of academic roles. So thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Robert Bowles. I'm one of the careers specialists here at the Royal Society of Chemistry. And I'm joined today by Dr. Amy Heptinstall, who's currently working for Iksuda Therapeutics. Amy, can you just give everyone who's listening just a quick overview of your career to date?
Yeah, so I started out doing my undergraduate in chemistry with medicinal chemistry at Newcastle University. I stayed there to do my MChem, and from there I worked at the university as a technician for a year before going back to my research group from my master's project to do a PhD. And then my PhD, which I finished last summer, I started working for Iksuda in July 2019, and Iksuda is a biotech company based in Newcastle upon Tyne, and I'm a development chemist there.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Amy. So we'll get back to that decision process a bit more in a second. So I just thought I'd just take you through really kind of what we're going to talk about today. First of all, just really kind of obviously, those of you that joined us today, you're interested in looking for alternatives to academia. I'm going to just go through a bit more about why that might be a good idea. Then we're going to focus on really about the kind of other sorts of job roles that are available to you. Then we're going to start looking at really how you can start to generate some new ideas about non-academic roles. So quite often when those that are working in academia, quite often they can struggle to come up with alternative roles for what else they could do. Then we're going to move on to kind of really the important stuff, actually how you present the skills that you've been developing during your academic career to non-academic employers. And we're going to round it off really just talking about the support that's available from the Royal Society of Chemistry, how you can get in touch. So hopefully that's what those of you that are joined us today are looking for. Hopefully you find that useful. Myself and Amy are going to go through that structure. What I will say is those of you that do want to ask questions, there's an opportunity for you to type in your questions really throughout the webinar today. And then myself and Amy will try and answer them towards the end of the session. So do stick around for those. And hopefully you can all contribute. So thanks for joining us. So let's just bear in mind, I've just got a message saying the audio is not working. Can everyone hear the audio okay? Anyone having problem with the audio? No? Okay, I'll try and keep going. So let's just get into that then. So why you might want to look for alternatives. The main reason is that at the moment there's a real structural imbalance between the number of people doing a PhD and the kind of permanent academic positions that are available. Okay, so sorry, I'm just getting questions coming in about the audio. Apologies for that. Hopefully you can hear okay. Is that fading in or out at all? Yeah, fantastic. So, as I mentioned, there is that imbalance between the number of people that are doing PhDs, the number of full-time academic roles afterwards. There's been a number of research done into kind of attitudes for research staff, particularly here in the UK. I will just say this is quite often repeated throughout Europe as well. It's not just a UK issue, between a disconnect between their career aspirations and the opportunities that are available for them within full-time academic roles. So this is really just to kind of highlight that point. This is some work that's done by VTI, which is a research developer organisation here in the UK. As you can see there, of those that are doing kind of academic research here in the UK, kind of 40 or 50% of them have that aspiration to kind of continue within a HE research or a teaching role. As I mentioned earlier, that is kind of pretty much replicated throughout a lot of the rest of Europe as well. There's more evidence for that again. So here again, we can't get in around about 40%. So this is really quite common. A lot of it, as I mentioned, is probably due to the fact that people quite often they go through their degree, that they go through their PhD. That's obviously the most obvious environment they're in. So getting that role within HE seems like the obvious thing to do. But the number of roles that are available is actually quite low. So throughout the whole of engineering, physical sciences, very few opportunities. So 10,000 may seem like a lot, but when you realise just in chemistry alone, there's about 1,500 chemistry PhDs every single year. That gives you sort of an indication of where some of the disparity can arise. So if you do want to look for alternatives, the first thing to do is really do some research. Obviously, you're all trained in how to do research within your areas of chemistry expertise, but you need to start thinking about that a bit about your own career as well. So, Amy, do you just want to talk about that process that you went through as you came towards the end of your PhD, as you started to think about what comes next? How did you approach that?
Well, I knew I didn't really want to stay in academia because I didn't want to go into the teaching side of things, but I did want to stay in research and in science. Really enjoyed my work in the lab, so I knew I wanted to go for more of a lab-based role. So I started looking at companies in my local area and in other towns commutable from my local area. I started keeping my LinkedIn up to date, set up job adverts on Chemistry World and Indeed, just to see what was coming in really. And the job I've ended up getting is quite close to the field I did my PhD in, because it's still in the medicinal sector, so I was really happy when I saw this advert.
Fantastic, Amy. Thanks for that. So so there's a good point there. You start doing the research into kind of what you like, what you enjoy, what's important to you. So for Amy, and forgive me for putting words in your mouth, Amy, she obviously wanted to carry on doing the research. She enjoyed that. She'd obviously ruled out teaching. So again, that's quite a good point to kind of think about what you don't want to do just as much as what you do want to do. So that's really important to have a handle on that and to take some time to think about that as well. You can also ask yourself this question. So this is a question that Amy asked, really: how involved with science do you want to be? So she wanted to be doing hands-on science. She wanted to stay in the lab doing research. That's what she's doing now. But there are other opportunities available to you as well. So you can take your scientific knowledge, you can kind of use it in a non-kind of hands-on environment. So here at the RSC is a prime example of that. We have a number of people that have done degrees, PhDs within chemistry, within other science subjects. They use that scientific knowledge within our publishing business, within other activities that we do as well. There's a whole range of those, really, from kind of publishing right through to things like patent law and other roles where you're using your science knowledge, but you're not actually doing hands-on science day to day. And then the third option is really to kind of use the skills that you've developed from doing your degree, from doing your PhD, but kind of they're not directly linked to science. So here it might be things like data analysis, it might be things like project management, your communication skills. There's lots of skills that you're building up during your PhD, during your research career, that are desirable and looked for by other employers. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. And the other thing to say at this point as well is that first job that you do when you do leave academia isn't necessarily what you're going to be doing forever. So Amy, you might be doing hands-on science at the moment. That might change and evolve over time. You might say, actually, no, this is what I want to do. I'm committed to it. I love it. But that may change over time as well. So that first role isn't necessarily what you're going to be doing for the rest of your career. So another question you can ask yourself is where you want to work. So Amy, for you, it's quite important to stay within your local area. Is that true to say?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I felt quite settled during my PhD, and my husband was based in Newcastle, and so I didn't really want to move away, but I would have been happy to commute, as I said, but it didn't end up I needed to.
You didn't need to do that. So that's a really key point as well. Think about what it is that is important to you. Do you have any personal ties? Do you have any financial ties, family ties to a particular area? Maybe you just want to stay in the area that you went to university or that you're working at the moment just because you enjoy working there. Another way to think about it is the type of organisation you want to work for. So, do you want to stay working within a university? There are still roles within universities that aren't academic related, so that's one option. Then you can go for sort of larger multinational companies. So again, big opportunities within that, a wide range of roles. Quite often they are quite well defined, but quite often you do have opportunities for career development. Quite often you have opportunities to move roles within the same organisation. Another thought is to actually be this guy. He's a one-man band. He's there really to represent the fact that nowadays we see, certainly within the chemical sciences, within our membership, we have around about 80% of our members are now working for small to medium enterprises. So that might be under 250 employers. It might be employees. It might be a relatively low turnover, but very niche, very specialist. Different set of skills you need in that. Quite often the role isn't very well defined, but there are opportunities for really fast career progression because you might end up doing lots of different things. So you can think about it geographically, but you can also think about the type of organisation you might want to work for as well. And then you get on to the next step, really, just seeing what's out there. So this is something that Amy did. This is a slide taken from Indeed, which is one of the job searches websites that she used. Just being really open-ended with the search term, just putting chemistry PhD in there. Just on the first page alone, we've got 11 different sectors. So pharmaceuticals, obviously linked to what Amy's doing at the moment. You've still got the academic roles, but you've got nanotech, biomedical devices, computational chemistry, synthetic chemistry, a really wide range of sectors. As I said, that's just the first page. So that particular query returned nearly 500 responses. Obviously, that's not geographically limited, but if you are starting to look to generate ideas for what you can go on and do after academia, this can be a really good way to approach it. Start your job search terms really open-ended. Amy, did you start to do that, or were you quite focused in the first instance in what you're looking for and you managed to find it quite quickly?
I did start quite open-ended. I think because I'm more of an organic chemist, I think I was searching for things like synthetic chemist. But I didn't necessarily stick my search just to pharmaceuticals. I was looking in process chemistry and other synthetic type roles.
Great stuff. So again, that's a really good point. Sometimes thinking sideways and logically about the skill set, even the technical skills that you've got, you don't necessarily need to stick within the industry or the sector that you've been doing your research in. Quite often you can think, okay, what other industries, what other sectors might use these particular chemistry techniques, these particularly technical techniques, or as I mentioned earlier, the skills that you use as well. So that's another really good way to approach it. If you are finding that you're not finding jobs that you want to apply for, then actually kind of moving sideways into other sectors can be a good approach to take. I'm going to get this out there as well. Is your science going to be enough in your job hunt? So I'm going to say no. Now for Amy it was. So well done, Amy. But But actually, if you think about it, there's probably quite a lot of people doing chemistry PhDs, certainly within organic synthesis. So is that going to be enough to actually get you a job? It might be enough to kind of make you qualified to apply for a job, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to kind of land you the role at the end. So we asked this question really, what's going to make you stand out beyond your science? Yes, you might have published, even if you're doing a postdoc, you might have a good publication record. You might be doing some really cutting edge science. I would say unless that science is directly related to the organisation that you end up working for, unless you want to be doing hands-on science, it may be of less relevance to your employer than maybe you think. So you've got to think about what's going to make you stand out. So certainly here in the UK, most employers are looking for recruiting the staff based on a competency or skills-based model, where equal importance is given to their knowledge, their practical experience, and their attitudes and behaviours as well. Amy, is this a process that you went through? Can you, hopefully it was fairly recent still, can you remember much about the interview process, what you're asked about?
Yeah, so obviously I was asked some sort of technical chemistry questions, but my interview started where I had to do a presentation on where I'd found a problem and addressed it. So that was quite interesting. It was quite difficult to think of something that I could talk for 15 minutes about. So I tried to sort of expand on, well, I picked a problem I'd had in the lab and I tried to get in like as many techniques and things like that I'd used to overcome that problem. And then we went into more questions. It says here, not looking for a science answer. And it was just that. It was like, tell us about a time when like you faced a difficulty and you solved that difficulty. There were questions about working with other people and like what would I do in a certain situation. One of the questions was about kind of an example of where I've made a change that was beneficial to my work group, or things like that really.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot, Amy. So yeah, the point there is that yes, you do need to be able to talk about your science. If you are going for a hands-on science role particularly, there will probably be a technical aspect of your recruitment process, but you also need to think about the other skills and attributes that you have. Also think about the commercial applications or any collaborations you have with your research. So some PhDs, some postdocs do have industrial partners. Are you making it really clear that you're mentioning that and showing that on your CV? That's really important if you are in that situation. If you're doing collaborations, again, highlight the kind of skills that you're using for that. Your communication skills obviously is the obvious answer for that as well. So that's that. I'm just going to move on to the next slide, if I may. Oh, I think I've gone to there. Bear with me a second. Okay, so sometimes it can be a bit confusing to work out, okay, so I've got my PhD, I've got my science, what else are employers looking for? So when you're doing your research about the type of roles that are out there, actually being able to use that research to also find out what employers are looking for those particular roles could be really, really important. So the job adverts, really good source of information about the skills that employers are looking for. If they're taking the time to put it in a job advert, in a person spec, then obviously it's important to them. So that's what you need to be demonstrating on your CV. We'll get onto that a little bit more in a second about how to do that. There's a few websites on the screen now that you can look at. But, when you are looking for jobs, take time to find out what it is that they're looking for, as well as the job title as well. So when you are job hunting, you basically got to communicate the skills, and this is the really crucial bit from the recruiter's point of view. It's very easy within the academic environment to be thinking about your research, focused on your research, your science, but actually you need to be able to communicate that from their point of view. So what is it that they're looking for? Why are they looking for it? Can you recognise that the employability skills that you've gained during your degree or during your PhD will give you an insight into some of those in a moment. If you do have the opportunity to kind of broaden work experience, if you don't currently have much at the moment, looking for opportunities while you're still within the university environment can be really beneficial. So I've put a few examples there. You might be volunteering, you might have a PhD with an industrial partner, which might actually involve some time within their labs. So look for opportunities to add kind of heft to your CV. This is a really important bit as well. Amy, talk about kind of how you went job hunting. You obviously signed up for some alerts on job sites. Did you do any of the other things that I had listed on the screen at the moment?
Yeah, well, I started going to a lot of conferences in the last year of my PhD. I took my poster to anywhere that would have my poster, basically, just to improve my communication skills and get my name out there. I also became involved in my RSC local section. I started volunteering there, which gave me a few industry contacts. And I organised a couple of symposium where I invited speakers from industry to come and do careers talks at my university, which really helps because one of the people who actually came to talk at that is now my line manager.
And presumably you didn't know that when you invited him to speak?
No, I didn't, and I didn't know he was going to be my line manager when I applied for the job. It was only when I was offered my interview that I found out he was still working there. But I do think that helped, having them already know my name and already know that I'm capable of organising an event.
Great stuff. So really key point there. That networking, building up your profile, getting out from without that academic environment can be really important to kind of finding opportunities and securing them as well. And again, chemistry is quite a small world. So even if it's not always obvious, sometimes networking can bring about really quite nice benefits. Really good. Thanks for that, Amy. Here's a few things as well to think about. I've put this down as what kind of scientists can miss. Let's have a look through some of the things that maybe aren't always obvious when you're applying for roles. One of the things I think is really important, I've talked to kind of people that are involved in recruitment, is actually being able to demonstrate an interest in the position. So be enthusiastic. What does it like? Why do you want to work there? When people say to you before an interview, make sure you research the company, that doesn't mean you've got to be able to quote back their annual report to them. But it does mean you've got to have a good understanding of what their business areas are, what their products are, who their customers are. You've got to have a good understanding of how the role that you're applying for is going to fit in and contribute to that. Also, while you're kind of doing that research, you can look at their values. So, what is it that their business is in? Is it an area that kind of resonates with you, that you feel adds real kind of value? Does that match? I think that there will be an expectation you'll work collaboratively. Is that something that you've come across, Amy? Do you find yourself working on your own in the lab, or do you interact with a lot of people during your work?
No, I do. I work within a chemistry team, and we also have collaborations with other institutions as well. So that's a range of CROs and academic groups. I do attend meetings and present my work back and forth with all the different groups that we're working with.
Fantastic. So for those of you that aren't aware, CROs, they're contract research organisations. So they're now organisations and companies that are doing a lot of the research that larger chemical companies used to do their R&D in-house. As science has become more complicated, more complex, many more companies now are becoming niche and specialists in particular areas. So be on the lookout for contract research organisations if you are interested in research roles. Include technical information on CVs is really important. So, can you quantify it as well? If you're running an HPLC, if you're running a GCMS, can you quantify how many hours you're spending? Are you doing, method development, method validation? That's absolutely fine to include on the CV, but if you can kind of add weight and heft to it, that's really, really important. Being explicit about what the information you have on your CV is really important. And by that, I mean, don't make assumptions about what people think. So if the role asks for experimental design, don't assume that they would think, oh, because you've got a PhD, you'll be good at experimental design. If you sat down with that recruiter and had that conversation, they would say yes. If they've got a pile of 20 or 30 CVs that they're trying to go through, trying to look for the words experimental design, and you don't provide that for them, they might use it as an excuse not to call you for interview. So, be really explicit about what it is that they're asking for. Make sure you demonstrate that to them. This is a really good one. I like this one. Join a group or organisation that's doing well or expanding. Is that something you can relate to, Amy? I'm just guessing here. What was the role that you took over? Was it an existing role, or was it a new role that was created, or?
My company is expanding, so it's a biotech company. And when I joined, we were still in an incubator facility, but we've now moved to some labs in a more commercial building, which is like more than double the size of our old space. So we're sort of hiring all the time at the moment.
Fantastic. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that it's more likely to be more dynamic. There's more opportunities for career progression. You feel like you're really contributing. So it's really important to that's the sort of questions you can be asking at interview. Why is the role created? Is it because Joe Bloggs, that's been doing it for 20 years, has left and we just need to carry on doing the same old? Or is it a new role that's been created that will lead to career opportunities for you as well? Being able to get close to good people, show them what you can do and they can rely on you. Again, that could be really important within your career further down the line. So quite often your line manager, your manager is going to be busy. If you can show to them that they can rely on you, they can trust you, there's going to be opportunities for more responsibility and more career progression as you go further as well. Everything that happens is decided by someone else. So ultimately, don't get too demoralized if you are struggling with your job search. And, as that story Amy told earlier about the person that is now her line manager, they probably made that ultimate decision or were certainly involved in it. So the more people you can network with, the more people you can talk to and influence, the people that you actually interview on the day, if you have a good rapport and relationship with them, they're much more likely to hire you. So make sure that you kind of reflect that when you're talking to them. But if you're not successful, try not to be too upset about it. If you've done the best you can when you're applying for roles, ultimately it is always someone else's decision. So just to kind of summarize really, some of the things we've been talking about today. At the end of the day, it is your responsibility. Be thinking ahead. Can you come up with a structured approach to achieving your career goals? This is really the key takeaway. Yes, focus on your technical skills development, but make sure you're developing those personal skills as well. Make sure you're presenting those to employers. Think about the skills that you're developing during a PhD. So you might be developing project management skills. So a PhD is a research project. A postdoc is a research project. It has key aims, has key objectives. Are you hitting those objectives as you go through? You might be developing good communication skills, as Amy mentioned earlier. So think about your time, your PhD, not just as a educational qualification, but also use it as an opportunity to demonstrate the skills that employers are looking for. If this all sounds a bit much to take in at the moment. There is help available to you. A lot of universities do have career support available to PhDs and more to postdocs as well. We do also have support available here at the Royal Society of Chemistry as well. We have our careers website that's on the screen now, just rsc.org/careers. I'm part of the team that offers career management support to our members. So associate members and above can have one-to-one conversations about their careers. We can help you make that transition. We can help you draft your CV, make it attractive to employers, help with applications. That's available. There's lots more that you can get involved with at the RSC as well, though. Amy mentioned about the networking and going out to conferences. There's a lot of opportunity to do that within the RSC. Amy, can you just finish off talking a little bit about the early career network that you're involved in here at the RSC as well, and also your work with the local section? What's involved in that? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yes, I joined my local section about 3 years ago now, and at the most recent AGM I became the treasurer. I really enjoyed working with the group. I will admit, it did start out as, oh, I should do this because it'll look good on my CV. But I ended up really enjoying the volunteering experience. Been involved in a lot of organisation of events and lectures, and I've also done a lot of STEM events, which I've enjoyed. Through that as well, I'm actually involved in the Early Career Network, so I attend 2 meetings a year down in London where I get to feedback on activities that are going on within the RSC, give my input as an early career chemist on those factors. Also go to my regional meetings where I get to find out everything that's going on in my region, and there's other things to get involved in too, like the Early Career Symposium. Useful.
Great stuff. Thanks, Amy. Hopefully that will get some of you interested and want to get more involved in the RSC as well, if you're not already. Has anyone got any questions? So I'm just going to go through some of the ones that have come in already. Okay, so we've got a question here from Sumia. What are the chances of transitioning to that industry after 5 years as an academic postdoc with a good record of publications and performances? So this is quite a common inquiry that we get here at the RSC. People, once you've done sort of 1 or 2 postdocs, is that easier or harder to make a transition away from academia? I think my point there is really kind of what I was talking about earlier, kind of can you take that experience, the skills that you've generated, and show how they are relevant to the employer and the role that you're applying for. So rather than getting too hung up on how long you've been there, actually demonstrate what you've got to offer. You know, so as you go through a postdoc, you might be taking on more responsibility. You might be supervising sort of either PhDs or undergraduate students. You may be more involved in the administration side of it, managing a budget. So there's lots of skills that you're going to be developing during a postdoc or during a couple of postdocs that are going to be attractive to an employer. Obviously, your academic publication, that's obviously really going to be important only if your employer is going to be in the area that is linked to your research. So in Amy's case, you know, her PhD, her research was directly relevant to the organisation she joined. I suspect they probably didn't hire her because of her publication record. And again, that's something to think about, that when you are within that academic environment, your academic publication record is probably the most important thing. Once you leave the academic environment, it becomes less important. So if you can use it to demonstrate written communication skills, if you can use it to demonstrate a track record of success and achieving the aims of the goals that then of the research project, that's fine. But non-academic employers probably aren't going to be hiring you on the basis of your publication record. Another question here. says necessary to become a CTO or reach a managerial role coming from a PhD background. What is necessary to become a chief technical officer or managerial role coming from a PhD background? So for there, I think companies tend to hire managers either with managerial experience, or they will take someone that's demonstrated a good technical track record within their organization and then promote them into a managerial role. Obviously, the management skill set is very different from the skill set that you need as a kind of technical specialist. You're going to be involved in sort of managing people day to day, so good communication skills, good people skills. You need to be able to think a bit more strategically, so the direction of the research, where is it going, how it relates to the organization. You might be involved in putting financial budgets together. So think about, as you're going through your technical career, as you're progressing, are there opportunities to kind of help your line manager with some of the things that they do that will allow you to develop the skills and experience that can then move you on into more of a management position? Another one here, can a postdoc make it difficult to transition from academia to industry? Amy, do your company hire many sort of from postdoc, or do they mostly go for a sort of PhD and undergraduate? I realise you've not been there that long. Do you have any much insight into that at the moment?
We don't have anybody here working in the science side of things who doesn't have a PhD, so everyone here is either straight from PhD or has come PhD postdoc here. Okay.
So a postdoc can be of use to that employer in that instance. The question was, can a postdoc make it difficult to make that transition from academia to industry? I think for me, as I mentioned earlier, what skills are you developing during that postdoc that are going to be attractive to the employer? Yes, obviously you're developing your technical knowledge, but if you are thinking about whether to do a postdoc or not, think about, okay, which postdoc am I going to do? What skills and experience am I going to get from doing that postdoc that I don't already have from doing a PhD? So, for example, you might want to go and join a new group. You might want to research a new area to broaden your technical expertise, to learn new chemistry techniques. But it's always going to come down to how you present what skills and experience you've gained during your PhD or your postdoc to your industrial hirer, making it kind of relevant to their business. So that's another question. Is working as a lecturer a handicap to join industry? No, again, that kind of really is an extension of what I was talking about. Use your lecturing to demonstrate experience, to demonstrate what it is that they're looking for. We've got lots of examples that we've come across of people that maybe do a PhD, go and work in industry for a bit, go back, become a lecturer, or then maybe go back and do industry afterwards. So those kind of barriers between the two, that they're much more porous maybe than they used to be. People change jobs more often, but ultimately it's going to be down to, can you convince your new employer, be they academic or industrial, that the experience and skills that you've had up to this point is relevant to the role that you're going to be going for. Amy, is there anything else that you want to kind of add? Any other tips or advice that you'd give to any of the people that might be listening today?
I just want to reiterate what you said on the point about the CV and making things really obvious. I had my CV reviewed by a couple of people, and they both sort of commented that it was too, in their words, waffly. And I redid it so that it was all bullet pointed with the skill highlighted and then sort of exemplifying how I thought I could show that skill. So everything that I wanted to show my future employer that I was good at was there, like right in their face. And I think that's really important.
Great stuff. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, that's really good advice. That seems like a really good place to end it. And as I mentioned earlier, if you do want help with CVs, if you do want help kind of taking an academic CV and making it more relevant to kind of non-industrial employers, do contact us via all the methods that you have on the screen at the moment. Final question that's just come in about cover letters. That's a really good point. I think it's something that people do struggle with sometimes. Quite often, cover letters just end up being duplications of what's in the CV. For me, think about the cover letter as really kind of why you want the job. So, why do you want the job? Why do you want to work for that organisation? Why you'll be a success in that role? And then you can use that final point to kind of allude back to the CV. So you could use phrases like, as you can see from my CV, I've got experience of doing X, Y, and Z. This would be relevant to the role because, yeah. So the CV is very much what you've got to offer, what experience, what skills you have. The cover letter is very much why you want the job, why you want to work for that organisation. It's a bit more emotional, a bit less factual. You have to be careful. You're never quite sure what employers are going to read first. So they might read the CV first. They might read the cover letter first. So both documents have to be able to stand up on their own, but they can complement each other very well as well. Amy, how did you find writing cover letters? Is that something that you struggled with?
I did find it difficult. Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to sell yourself. I think people have a tendency to not big themselves up as much as you need to. So I would say just don't be embarrassed to do that. And I think, like as you said, the cover letter is the time to really pick up on what is specific about that company. So you can sort of reiterate your skills that you've highlighted on the CV and say why you think that they would be a really good skill to have in said job.
Great stuff. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for your time. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If there's no more questions, I'm going to draw it to a close today. We will be uploading this webinar onto YouTube. You will be able to watch it again and go back over it if there's any points that you missed. And as I said, if you do want more help with making that transition and you're a Royal Society of Chemistry member, obviously get in touch and we'll be happy to help you. Thanks very much for listening today. And hopefully we'll see you again on another webinar soon. Thanks. Bye.